Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be reading to you guys again. I really wish that I could be there with you in person and talking to you all. I hope that everybody at Wellsville and beyond are doing really well. I shared two stories so far on Mrs. Permenter's channel. The first one was Clever Beatrice, which was a tall tale. The second one was my favorite Dr. Seuss, which was Horton Hatches the Egg. And today I'm going to share one of my favorite author illustrators. I call this person an author illustrator because he not only writes the story, but he also illustrates it. So he is the author and the illustrator. And he's very famous. His name is Chris Van Allsburg. If you are in my homeroom, or if you had me last year, you wrote a story based on one of his books, The Mysteries of Harris Burdick, which is a really fun book. If you can check that one out, it's a great one. But most people know him from Jumanji and Zathura and The Polar Express. He wrote and illustrated all of those along with many, many others. And for example, The Sweetest Fig, The Stranger, and The Widow's Broom. And today I'm going to share this. In his very first book that he wrote, The Garden of Abdul Ghazazi, he won the Caldecott Medal for his illustrations, which is the highest children's book illustrators award that you can win. And in his first book, he had a little dog illustrated in it named Fritz. And he has put Fritz in every single one of his books since. So one of the things while you're listening to this story that I'd like for you to do is to see if you can keep your eye out for Fritz. He has a pretty big picture of him in here. The other thing that I really enjoy about Chris Van Allsburg's illustrations is he adds an air of mystery and uniqueness to his illustrations because he never usually does it as a straight-on perspective. It's normally from an angle or looking up, seeing things from the side, which I really enjoy about his books because it matches the story, which always kind of comes at you a little differently. It doesn't quite tell you the story straight out. So, without much further ado, this is The Widow's Broom by Chris Van Allsburg. Witches' brooms don't last forever. They grow old, and even the best of them one day lose the power of flight. Fortunately, this does not happen in an instant. A witch can feel the strength slowly leaving her broom. The sudden bursts of energy that once carried her quickly into the sky become weak. Longer and longer running starts are needed for takeoff. Speedy brooms that in their youth outraced hawks are passed by slow flying geese. When these things happen, a witch knows it's time to put her old broom aside and have a new one made. On very rare occasions, however, a broom can lose its power without warning and fall with its passenger to the earth below, which is just what happened one cold autumn night many years ago. Again, here he is with his different perspective. Out of a moonlit sky, a dark-cloaked figure came spinning to the ground. The witch, along with her tired broom, landed beside a small white farmhouse, the home of a lonely widow named Minna Shaw. At daybreak, Widow Shaw discovered the witch lying in her vegetable garden. She was bruised and bloody and couldn't stand up on her own. In spite of her fear, and because she was a kind woman, Minna Shaw helped the witch inside and put her to bed. The witch asked Minna Shaw to draw the curtains, then wrapped herself tightly in her black cape and fell soundly asleep. She lay there perfectly still all day and all evening. When she finally awoke at midnight, her wounds had completely healed. She rose from the bed and moved silently through the widow's house. Minna Shaw was asleep in a chair by the fireplace, where embers of a dying fire glowed on the hearth. The witch knelt and took one of the red-hot coals in her hand. Outside she made a fire of leaves and twigs, then dropped a strand of her hair into the flame. The fire hissed and crackled, burning with a brilliant blue light. Before long the witch could see a dark form flying overhead. It was another witch, who circled slowly and landed beside the fire. The two women spoke briefly, the first witch gesturing toward the garden where her old broom rested. Then they sat side by side on the second witch's broom and flew off over the treetops. When Minna Shaw woke up, she wasn't surprised to find that her guest had gone, which, as she knew, had unusual powers. It didn't surprise her either when she saw that the old broom had been left behind. The widow guessed it had lost its magic. It was an ordinary broom now, just like the one she kept in her kitchen. She began using it around the house and found that it was no better or worse than brooms she'd used before. One morning, Minna Shaw was still in bed when she heard a noise coming from the kitchen. She peeked in and saw something that made her heart jump. There was the broom, sweeping the floor all by itself. It stopped for a moment and turned to the widow, then went back to work. At first, Minna was frightened, but the broom seemed harmless, and what's more, it was doing a very good job. Unfortunately, it swept all day long. In the evening, to get some peace, she locked the broom in a closet, but when it tapped on the door for more than an hour, Minna felt guilty and let it out. As she lay in bed listening to the broom sweeping each room over and over, she wondered if it could learn to do other things. In the morning, she led the broom outside and found out that it was a very good student. She needed to show it how to do something only once. Soon the broom could chop wood and fetch water, feed the chickens, and bring the cow in from the pasture. It could even pick out simple tunes on the piano. Do you think the chickens like the broom? I don't know, it's bringing in food. Not a week passed before the widow's neighbors, the Spiveys, found out about the broom. Their farm was just down the road, the only other place around. It was one of the 8 Spivey children who saw the broom first. When the boy told his father, Mr. Spivey ran straight across the road to the widow's house. "Is it true?" he demanded. Did she really have such a broom? "Oh, yes," Minna Shaw answered. "It's wonderful." She told her neighbor all about the broom and the witch who'd left it behind. Then she took him around to the back of the house where the broom was hard at work, splitting wood. Mr. Spivey was horrified. "This is a wicked, wicked thing," he said. "This is the devil." The broom stopped working and, still clutching the axe, hopped toward the widow and her neighbor. Mr. Spivey, red-faced with anger, turned quickly and hurried home. Would you hurry home if you saw a broom holding an axe hopping towards you? Would you stay and introduce yourself? Soon more distant neighbors heard about the broom and visited The widow's farm. The men who saw it seemed to agree. It probably was a wicked thing. But their wives pointed out that it was a great help to the widow and could play the piano well, considering that it just struck one note at a time. No one's feelings were as strong as Mr. Spivey's. "It's evil and it's dangerous," he told everyone who would listen. "We'll all be sorry if this thing stays among us." As days went by, the broom seemed as innocent and hard-working as ever. Though it had learned how to do many things, sweeping brought it special pleasure. It was, after all, a broom. Occasionally, when there was nothing left to do around the widow's house, it would hop down the road that separated Minna Shaw's and the Spivey's farm. The road was dirt, of course, and the broom could amuse itself for hours. One afternoon, the two Spivey boys and their dog walked along the road where the broom was happily at work. When they saw what it was doing, they kicked the small stones the broom had swept aside back into its path. The broom ignored them and shuffled off to sweep another part of the road. But the Spivey boys would not leave it alone. They called the broom names. When it continued to ignore them, they picked up a couple of sticks and started tapping the broom's handle. Finally, it stopped sweeping. The broom turned to the two boys and knocked them both on the head so hard they fell to the ground in tears. The broom hopped off, but the Spivey dog ran after it, yapping and biting at its bristles. "Get him!" the boys yelled. The little dog leaped into the air and caught the broom by the handle. But he was not there for long. That evening, Mr. Spivey drove in his wagon up to the widow's house. He was not alone. 3 men from neighboring farms were in the wagon, along with a long wooden stake and coils of rope. Mr. Spivey knocked loudly. When she opened her door, Minna was frightened by what she saw. "We've come for the broom," her neighbor told her. "It's beaten my sons and likely done worse to my dog." The poor animal was nowhere to be found. The widow could tell by their faces that the men would not be leaving without her broom. There was nothing she could do to stop them. For a moment she stood silently, then answered, "Of course you are right. If it could do such a thing, we must get rid of it." She led the men into her kitchen. "It sleeps in here," she whispered, pointing to a closet. "If you move it carefully, it will not wake up." The men knew how strong the broom was and hoped the widow was right. Okay, they're going to get the broom. What do you think? Should they take it away and burn it? Does it deserve it? What do you think? They opened the closet door, revealing the slumbering broom. One of the farmers took it out and gently held it against the stake, while the others wrapped it in yards of rope. They carried the broom outside, drove the stake into the ground, and gathered straw around it. Mr. Spivey lit the fire. In no time, flames turned the broom to ashes. Life soon returned to normal around the widow's farm. The Spiveys even found their dog, healthy but hungry, caught in the branches of a tall spruce tree. Then one morning, Minna Shaw called on her neighbors with frightening news. She had seen the ghost of the broom. It was as white as snow and moved through the woods at night, carrying an axe. Mr. Spivey did not believe her, but that night, under a full moon, He watched from a window as the broom's white ghost came out of the woods and slowly circled his house. The next night it returned, circling even closer, and the night after it came again, tapping the axe lightly on the Spivey's door. There's their house. The next morning, Mr. and Mrs. Spivey packed their things, their dearest possessions, and 8 children into their wagon. Mr. Spivey tried to convince the widow to leave with them, but she chose to stay behind in her little farmhouse. She went down to the road as the wagon pulled away and waved goodbye to her neighbors. "You're a brave woman," Mr. Spivey called out. That evening the widow fell asleep in her chair by the fire. She'd been listening to music, simple tunes played one note at a time on the piano. A gentle tap on the shoulder woke her. She looked up and smiled at the broom. Not a ghost at all, but still covered with the coat of white paint she'd given it. "You play so nicely," Minna Shaw said. The broom bowed, put a log on the fire, and played another tune. And that is The Widow's Broom by Chris Van Allsburg. What did you think? Did you like the broom? Did you not like the broom? What do you think about Minna Shaw? What do you think about her neighbors, the Spiveys? I like that Chris Van Allsburg lets us kind of make our own judgments and our own decisions about his characters. He just kind of presents them and lets us come to our own conclusions. I hope you really enjoyed this one. I hope that you all are doing well. I miss you all, and I hope that everybody is getting a chance to read and do all kinds of fun things with your family, and maybe put a little math and science in there every once in a while. You know I have to ask for that. And to make sure that you are being safe and healthy, and I really hope that you're happy and well. So have a great day, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye.